Intuitively, how to turn a decimal into a percentage. 0.3 is 30% because 0.5 is 50%. It's also important to think about what happens as we go back, because most percentages from 10 to 99 are double-digit percentages, at least whole number percentages. But what happens, how do we express 1%, 2%, 3%? Well, if we get to 0.1, we know that that must be 10% in line with the pattern we've seen. So what comes before 0.1? Well, 0.09. So that's 9%. 0.08 is 8%. 0.01 is 1%. But now that we understand that intuitively, we should also think about how we would do this as a rule. What does it take to turn 0.3 into 30%? You times by 100. The decimal point has to move twice, and in every empty space you get a 0. So 0.5 times 100 is 50%. 0.1 times 100 is 10%. So to turn a decimal into a percentage, like 0.32 into a percentage, we times it by 100. So 0.32 is 32%. 0.065, what is that as a percentage? Well, let's just multiply it by 100. Move the decimal point once, twice. 6.5%. So now that we know how to turn decimals into percentages, we can start talking about how to turn percentages into fractions. And the hint for this is actually in their name. Per means out of, and cent, like century, 100 years, means 100. So 50% is just 50 out of 100. 32%, that's just 32 divided by 100. So we can then take an extra step, because we know what happens when you divide a number by 10, 100, or 1,000. The decimal point moves to the left if you're dividing, to the right if you're multiplying. So 50 divided by 100 is 0.5, which is what we looked at earlier. 0.5 is the same as 50%, and 50 over 100 is just an equivalent fraction for 1 over 2. So to write anything as a percentage, you divide it by 100. So let's say that we want to convert 50% into a fraction. Well, we just take 50, we divide it by 100, but then we have to remember to simplify, to put things in their simplest form. Cancel out those zeros. That's the same as dividing the top and the bottom by 10. And then divide the top and the bottom by 5. And you get 1 over 2. And you should always do this unless told otherwise. It's good practice, and 1 over 2 makes a lot more intuitive sense than 50 over 100. Keep in mind, this won't always be possible. So for example, 13% as a fraction will just be 13 over 100. And because they don't have any factors in common, 13 over 100 would actually be your final answer. What about converting 125% into a fraction. Now, it's important to note here that this is more than 100%. And that's fine. It just means that you'll get more than a whole. You'll get a whole and then some other parts. It'll be 1 plus 25%. So still 125 over 100. We can simplify down by dividing by 25. That'll be 4 in the denominator. And 125 divided by 25 is 5. 5 over 4, that's 1 and 1/4. Now, this is an opportunity to make a really important point. We said that 125% was 100% plus 25%. The 100% represents this one whole. 25% is represented by this quarter. And there's a few conversions which are just worth remembering. They don't expect you to remember them, but it makes your work much easier if you do. Remember that 1/3 is actually a recurring decimal. That means it goes on forever, and it's 33 1/3%. 1/2 is 50%. 1/4 is half of that, which is 25%. 2/3 is 66.67%. That's also recurring, but it's been rounded there for you. And you can even use these to work out other fractions and decimals. So if a quarter is 25%, and that's half of a half, well, half of a quarter is an eighth, and half of 25 is 12.5%. So these are worth remembering just as results that you keep in mind when you do questions. Now, we said that by the end of this lesson, we would be able to answer the question that we started with. So let's do that. We want to put these in order from largest to smallest, also known as descending order. And to do that, they all need to be in the same form. Now, that will be decided on based on the question and your experience, whether you want to turn them all into fractions or decimals. In this case, it would be easier to turn them all into decimals. So 0.35 is already a decimal. A quarter, as we saw earlier, is 25%, so that's 0.25. 29% we know can be written as 0.29. So far we have 0.35, 0.25, 0.29, and 0.297. So all we have to do is convert this into a decimal. And we can do that by first considering it as a percentage. 6 out of 25 as a percentage would be something out of 100. 25 times 4 is 100. So we do 6 times 4 as well. And that's 24 out of 100. So it's 24%, which is 0.24. But there's still something stopping us from doing this. And that is that extra digit there. In order to compare all of these decimals, they need to have the same number of digits after the decimal point, because it may seem like, let's say, 29 should have a 0 at the end. And that tells us that it's smaller than 0.297. 0.24 is 0.240. This is 0.250 and 0.350. And now you can just compare them like regular numbers. 240, 297, 290, 250, and 350. So which of these is the biggest? The biggest is 0.35. When you actually write your answer in the exam, make sure to use the original figures that were given, not the ones that you've converted. So 0.35 is the largest. The next largest is 0.297, and we write it as it is. After that, 0.290, but they gave it to us as 29%, so we write it as 29%. Then 250, so we write a quarter. Then 240, and that was given as 6/25. And we've now arranged all 5 numbers in order from largest to smallest. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.